And welcome everybody to another episode of the At the Pylon podcast. On today's preview episode for the Patriots matchup against the Dallas Cowboys this upcoming Sunday, we're going to debrief the Patriots offense. We said a lot of things last episode after their loss to the New York Jets, and I have a bit of a debrief to kind of respond to those claims now that they've sat a little bit more. But then after that, we're going to have a full preview of Pats versus Cowboys. Who do the Patriots have to look out for on the Cowboys roster to contain in order to get a much-needed win to get to 500 on the season? Let's dive right into it. Now, to start us off, the Patriots' offense was definitely a point of concern last week, to say the least. And walking out of last week's matchup against the Jets, although we got the 15-10 win, it was demoralizing, to say the least, to think about the Patriots' future after last game. So now that I've let it sit for a while, I have a little bit of a different take on the end of that game, but it really led to me questioning, why do I even still think that the Patriots are going to be good this year? Obviously, I've stood by this idea that I believe the Pats have a shot at AFC Championship potential this year. Not winning it, of course, but getting there. I don't think they can get past the Chiefs if they get there, but I thought that this team had potential to muster stuff together and really go on a run if they were to make it to the playoffs. But this last game against the Jets all led that into question. But after letting it sit for a little bit more, I have a little bit of a different perspective. Now, one thing that I stand by, and I still stand by, is that I have hope in Mac Jones. I've seen vast improvements from him this season compared to last season and even 2021. I would just say that this season he's in a worse circumstance in terms of the offensive line than what he was in 2021. So we're obviously seeing a little bit more of a struggle on that front. But overall, I felt that Mac has played very well this year. He's shown that he can lead the offense down the field, kind of take charge for himself, which is something that I wasn't really confident in giving Mac Jones that ball to run with it. Not literally, but drive the team downfield and lead them to a score. In the past, especially last season, in 2021, I would say it was a little bit more of a comfortableness there, at least in trusting Mac, because he was so restrained by Josh McDaniels in terms of keeping him safe. But last season, I wouldn't say Mac Jones is capable of driving this team down the field for a game-winning drive. This year, I can say that. But regardless, the Pats game against the Jets was definitely a regression from their Week 1 matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, a game that I thought was showing vast signs of improvement for New England. Tying into that, the offense really, the problem, I guess, that really stemmed at the offense is the fact that they did the absolute minimum in this win against the Jets. Obviously, 15 points is nothing special, but when you look at the product on the field and how the Pats were playing on offense, they were doing the absolute minimum. And this kind of ties into what Chandler, or my co-host, was saying last week. He said that the Pats are only going to let Mac Jones cook when we absolutely have to. And my thoughts at that moment, as soon as he said that, were why didn't we let him cook in this case? Obviously, it was a very close game. It seemed like we could have used some offense to create more comfortability in this game, get a more comfortable positioning over the New York Jets. In my mind, at least after hearing that, I was like, this is totally a necessary situation where the Patriots needed to pull the trigger on offense and just weren't. But what I've come to understand, I guess, is our view of a comfortable lead is getting ahead by more points. At least that's what a comfortable lead seems by most viewers' perspective. But in this game for the New England Patriots and their offensive coaching staff, I should say, it was not that. They had a different idea of what feeling comfortable was in this game. And I really started to notice that after the Patriots started reacting to this loss, or this win rather, somewhat of a moral loss, but technically a win on paper. After seeing a lot of these post-game conferences, something started turning in my mind that I was like, this is just off, because the quote that I took from last week, Bill Belichick said that it was, quote, a good win for New England. His wording following that statement is something that is really pivotal to pay attention to. Belichick said, quote, We have to convert better and get more points. 15 is not. Generally, you're going to need more than that. But it was good enough today. So, that's one thing to consider. Belichick acknowledging the idea that we can't score 15 points on a consistent basis and win. But for today, it was enough. Then we moved to the post-game conferences with the players. We head to the locker room, some players up to the podium. A consistent theme amongst everybody talking to the media after the game was good win, no turnovers. Let's start with what David Andrews said. Short quote. He said, quote, good team win. Starts with no turnovers. Ezekiel Elliott, same idea. He said, quote, we did a good job taking care of the football. We didn't get behinds. And finally, Mac Jones, part of the reason why we didn't get so many points in this game and were only held to 15 is because he was barely involved in the passing offense. Being the quarterback, he just wasn't really throwing the ball in that second half. Mac Jones said, quote, that was our goal, no turnovers. So we definitely did that. So this lack of aggression on offense that I was so critical of last week should be a problem in most cases for most NFL teams, of course. But it's more clear now after seeing the post-game reactions from everybody and really analyzing the way that New England played in that second half that it was done on purpose. What Chandler said last week about the Jets' offense being among one of the league's worst resonates with me now, to say the least. It provides more of an explanation as to why we played so passive, and that's because of the simple reason that Zach Wilson just can't play football right now. Whether or not that's his fault is another conversation, but the fact of the matter is, he was absolutely no threat to New England, and we saw exactly that on Sunday. But last week, I was constantly talking about the gifts that the Patriots kept giving the Jets in form of chance after chance after chance on offense. And it finally clicked for me after scoping in on everything the Patriots were saying after the game, is that the only real gift we could have given New York in this game that would have given them a real chance to win was a defensive turnover. If the Jets got an interception, recovered a fumble, something like that, a chance to set them up deep in our own end where Zach Wilson doesn't even have to really do anything, they can just kick a field goal, because at one point, this game was a 3-point game before we got that safety. That would have been the most vital loss the Patriots could have taken. And while it seemed like this game at least was unfolding by the grace of God the way that it did for New England, it now seems like a more calculated approach rather than just a miracle happening for New England, that it just happened to work out the way it did with Randall Cobb barely missing that Hail Mary attempt by Zach Wilson. So, sure, we did get some luck with that, but I guess a lot of people, including the New England Patriots offensive coaching staff, would say, we'd rather bank on the Jets completing that Hail Mary than risk any sort of turnover to the New York Jets, because they viewed us turning the ball over to the New York Jets and blowing the game that way as a more likely scenario than them driving down the field and scoring a touchdown, which almost happened. But granted, it didn't. And I think that's a lot of what New England fans and analysts all around the New England area, I should say, we're kind of forgetting. And it's that the Patriots won this game. Although it was by a hair, they won. If Zach Wilson never completed that pass to Garrett Wilson to get them to the 50-yard line, enough time to barely spike the ball with 1 second left and try to shoot for the end zone, we wouldn't even really be talking about this. Because the game came down to inches off one play, and that was the pass play to Garrett Wilson. Other than that, if that never happened, the Pats had this game won. Sure, it was an offensive disaster, but they won. But I want to hear from Chandler Betts, my co-host, fellow analyst. What does he think about this take? All right, Chandler Betts, co-host, analyst, is with us. What's your response, Chandler, to the supposed, I wouldn't say a theory, but kind of understanding of the Patriots offense that I've recently developed?
Sure. I feel like you're not in the minority here, but at the same time, I feel like we as Patriots fans are kind of grasping at straws with the offense right now. Anytime you as an offense put up 13 points on 13 drives, that's ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous, especially when you have 11 minutes and 8 seconds more of the time of possession than the other team. And like, I understand your point that the goal may have been to, make them play how we want to play, make them play a slow, bruising style. But typically, when you're trying to focus on winning the time of possession, it's because you're afraid of the other offense.
Mm.
If you're afraid of Zach Wilson, that is something that we should have a whole nother conversation about. And if you really don't think that he can lead them to score, then why wouldn't you just, you know, go score yourself? You shouldn't be worried about him having the ball if you can just put up points. Statement wins are really important. I talked about this in our last episode. Statement wins are really important, especially for an offense that hasn't been able to effectively score this year. It's been unimpressive, especially in the first half of games. I'm starting to get to the point where I don't know if this offense can reliably score enough points to win football games. Because Bill talked about, he said 15 points isn't usually enough to win football games, and he's right. And I don't think we'll be that low again, but I also don't have a ton of faith that we're going to be much higher.
Mm.
And to be honest, neither does Vegas. If you look at the over-under for the game, it was 35 and a half, which is the lowest pre-October over-under in the last 13 years.
Wow.
And the game that was below us, it was a 34 and a half line, I believe, or maybe it was 35. It was the Steelers versus the Bucks, and that was the Steelers without Ben Roethlisberger, with Charlie Batch and Josh Freeman as the two quarterbacks. And you know
God.
what the score of that game was, Nick?
What?
It was 38-13. They actually scored points in an NFL where points were less because it was a much more of a run attack game back in 2010.
Yeah.
But all of this to say, the offense is on the precipice of wasting another very solid defensive season, and it's just not good enough. And I don't really want game flow to be an excuse for either an offensive coordinator that's unwilling to take risks against a team that, frankly, that should be the team that we are trying things against, or an offense that is incapable of doing those risks. We're not at practice. We can't say, we're not in the meeting rooms. We don't know exactly what the case is, but it's got to be one of those two.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that you make, Chandler. Don't get me wrong. I still recognize that last week's offensive performance was terrible, to say the least, and I'm definitely still in that boat. And I guess really none of what I said really matters unless if New England is able to muster up and actually score points this week against Dallas. Sure, I can argue all day that that was their planned strategy against the Jets last week. You don't want to get a defensive turnover because that's really the only way that the Jets are going to be able to bite back. But it really just won't matter unless if New England proves me wrong, or right, I should say, and actually comes out and has an offensive game plan prepared for this game. Because the fact of the matter is, if you can't score against teams like the Cowboys that can actually put up more than 10 points in a game, you're done for. You're not going to be making the playoffs, let alone the AFC Championship, like I said that we had a chance at. But regardless of what I said, I just want to applaud you, Chandler, because this point of needing another weapon has become more and more emphasized, I guess, over these past couple of weeks. Because on a few days, a few plays that we did try to move the ball downfield in last week's game against the Jets, and the few scenarios where Bill was like, all right, we got to get this first down to keep this drive alive, etc. We got to move the ball downfield. A lot of cases, our weapons were not able to step up to the plate. Of course, there's guys like Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki. I feel like the whole tight end room has been very solid this year.
Yep.
Kendrick Bourne has been having a good season, although he's, more of a wide receiver too than a one, like you've said in the past. I still think he's having a really good year.
Yep.
And then there's guys like Demario Douglas, who we were talking about last week, not getting a lot of playing time, but still showing signs of a dynamic player when he's on the field. But other than those guys who were able to play well, any of them are not really 5-star players. And a 5-star player, the fact is that it could change our entire game strategy. And it would have changed our entire game strategy against the Jets last week. So we wouldn't have to been banking on this whole, keep the ball safe the whole time. Because if we had a 5-star player, we would be able to move downfield without the Jets, even being able to stop us, because that's what 5-star players do.
Mm-hmm.
One thing to prep for is the 5-star players that are on possibly the market this season. There have been rumors circulating that the Pats, obviously last year, they were interested in Broncos wide receiver Jerry Jeudy. But thanks to the Broncos' 0-3 start, they just lost 70-20 to the Miami Dolphins last week. Rumors are circulating that they're going to blow up the roster. NFL notifications on X said that Jeudy is expected to be re-engaged in trade talks, with teams like the Browns, Patriots, and one other unknown NFL team being interested. What do you think, Chandler? If the Pats are able to land a guy like Jeudy, would that vastly change their offense? Sure, NFL notifications, not like an Ian Rappaport level of, reporting, but they have been right on a couple of things, including the Lamar Jackson contract extension, the Colts coach hiring, stuff like that. But how do you think this could impact the Patriots' offensive scheme?
Yeah, so I think if we were to get Jerry Jeudy, I think he would probably be the best wide receiver that we have. He was a very talented player coming out of Alabama. Loved him a lot. That was a really strong wide receiver room. It was him. It was Devontae Smith. It was Jalen Waddle, and it was Henry Ruggs, all of whom were first-round picks. All of whom were first-round picks. Dangerous offense back then. That was when they had Tua. And I don't know I think Mac got a couple games with Jeudy as well. I believe he got the second half of his junior season together.
Mm-hmm.
But since he's been in the NFL, Jeudy has had some injury issues. But overall, he's a very talented receiver. Last year, he almost had 1,000 receiving yards in a sputtering offense last year with that Broncos team. I think that he is an excellent wide receiver. However, I don't know how much that really changes our offense because of all the times we've talked about the offensive line. I don't know how effective that would really change. Like if we're looking at trying to add 2 wins, I think we need to do more than that if we want to make the playoffs. But how much are we willing to trade for him versus how much is the net benefit?
Yeah,
because I believe also he is approaching the end of his contract. I'm not sure if it's this
I think
year
he's
or if
got
it's
1
next
year
year.
left. I think he's got 1 year left after this year.
After this one,
sure.
yeah, that would make sense because then you have the 5th-year option with first-round players. What do you think you would want to trade for him, Nick? Like what kind of draft capital most likely?
This is a good question, actually, because on X or Twitter formerly, I've seen a lot of packages that look very attractive from the Patriots' perspective.
Mhm.
Like Jeudy for like Juju and like a 4th, which I just don't think the Broncos would even consider.
Yeah.
Like that to me is just ridiculous. This guy's a former first-round wide receiver, and he's not a bust by any stance. He's just had some injury problems. What I would feel okay with giving away would be like Juju or Parker, one of the two, preferably Juju, because Parker, I think, still has some gas left in the tank. Juju's just been not very existent on this Pats offense to start the year, but
Yeah.
I'd do Juju in a 3rd, but I don't know if the Broncos would even accept that. I don't know if I'd be willing to go higher.
So my point is, and this is just how I look at like trades in general. What do the Broncos gain by getting Juju? What do they gain by getting Devontae
Literally nothing.
Parker? If
Nothing.
they're getting rid of Jerry Jeudy, then they shouldn't want to get older wide receivers.
So if anything, we'll package 2 picks probably, right?
That's my thought. I think that I would be comfortable giving a 3 and a 5. I'd like to push that off for a year. I'd like to do it 2025, 3 and a 5. But if it has to be 2024, that's not a big deal for me. A 2 is where we start to get into, do we want to do that? Not that we have a great track record of drafting in the 2nd round in general, but I think that I'm comfortable doing a 3 and a 5, maybe a 3 and a 4, but a 2 is what it might take. And I don't know if I'm doing that based on what we'll have to eventually give him in 18 months, all of the contract implications, the cap implications, and also generally how effective is he going to make our offense? How much more effective?
Let me say this too. I think part of it will come down to the competition that we experience from other teams that are interested. Like, you really think the Browns, You think the Browns are going to be coughing up a second round pick right now for Judy? I don't know if they even have the draft capital to afford to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if they do because they made so many trades for the Deshaun Watson deal. I believe that this is the last year that they have of those draft pick loss, so they
Oh,
could
really?
trade a 20. I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's the last one.
And I
Maybe
mean,
there's one more
regardless, I
after this.
mean, did they trade for Cooper, right? That wasn't a free agency signing.
Oh gosh, yes. No, I believe he was cut by the Cowboys. I can check that right now.
Yeah, yeah, no, they did trade.
Oh, it was a trade. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
the fourth round
2022.
pick,
Oh,
probably.
yeah, no, fifth round pick. All right, never mind, never mind. Okay, so that was
Yeah, that's crazy.
they basically just got him for chips.
Yeah,
So
pretty much. And we could have
good
done that.
job, Patriots. Yeah, I was gonna say we could have done that. But I
Yeah.
mean, considering our track record, regardless of what we'd want to give up, we did trade a second round pick for Mohamed Sanu back in the day.
Yeah, I
So I
know.
mean, a second round pick on paper would look a lot better in this case than it would in that
It's
case, I
true.
guess.
It is true.
But regardless, the Cowboys have a lot of 5-star players on their squad. Talk to me about some of the threats, I guess, on both offense and defense for the Cowboys. Who do the Patriots need to contain?
Well, I think when you talk about the Cowboys, the first person you always have to talk about is Micah Parsons. In my opinion, and this is maybe a hot take, I don't even think it should be. I think he's the best defensive player in football. There's one
That's a
other
fair
person, and it's
assumption.
it's TJ Watt's the only other person that I will listen to an argument for. But Micah Parsons, he runs like a 4.38. He played his first game in the NFL as a middle linebacker, and then they're just like, okay, now we want you to run off the edge. And now he just plays everywhere. There was one play last 2 weeks ago against the Jets where he's just standing menacingly over the center doing like basketball crossovers. And I've never seen a center more scared in my life. That guy was terrified. Connor McGovern. He
Yeah.
was horrified that Micah Parsons was just gonna tear through the offense, and he did, and he caused a forced fumble that play. Um, he is so good, and our offensive line is so not good that I am so afraid. But on
Yeah.
top of him, they have an incredibly deep defensive line as well that they can get pressure consistently with four and then drop everybody else, which is going to make our lives very difficult. We're gonna have to throw the ball, and
Yep.
I want us to very much so because I think that's probably our most efficient offense right now. But it may take a quarter and a half for Bill O'Brien to realize that. So that will really determine the flow of the game on our offensive side.
Really?
Defensively, yeah.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say Bill O'Brien was also talking about Micah Parsons this past week in press conferences. He said he's a top 5 player in the NFL right now, regardless of
Yeah,
position. So
agreed.
definitely a threat that I think he needs to watch out for. But
Yeah.
you were on the point of the Patriots needing to throw the ball. And I think one valid thing to kind of push forward from that is that their star cornerback Trayvon Diggs tore his ACL in practice
Mm-hmm.
last week. How is this going to affect the Patriots' offensive approach along with that extremely dangerous front seven for the Cowboys?
Yeah, it's going to make a big difference because Trayvon Diggs, as much as people want to give him grief for letting up a lot of yards, I think he's let up the most amount of yards in the last 2 years. He also is a turnover machine. He is somebody who's willing to take that risk. And at the end of the day, the modern NFL defense is a very bend, don't break defensive scheme right now. And you're willing to bend, you're willing to get those lose those yards, get them down into the red zone
Mm-hmm.
with as long as you can also get those interceptions, which he's proven that he's able to do. So not having to deal with that is going to be very effective in the same way that defense or that offenses are going to be going against us thinking, oh, we don't have to deal with Marcus Jones. We don't have to deal with Jonathan Jones. I don't know exactly what their health status is for Jonathan Jones right now, but it's going to make our lives easier when we have to deal with their second corner on our first wide receiver, who's really a second wide receiver. So it's kind of leveling the playing field in a way, but they do still have Malik Hooker across the secondary, who is finally living up to his potential that he
Mm-hmm.
came out of Ohio State when he was getting a lot of Ed Reed comparisons coming out. He's been able to show himself as a real heavy hitting, kind of like free roaming safety down deep. And that's going to limit a lot of teams vertically this season for them. So having Trayvon Diggs and him was incredible for a defense, as we saw. They 40-0'd the Giants, they 30-10 the Jets, and they lose to the Cardinals without Trayvon Diggs. So it's a big deal. Hopefully we can effectively capitalize on it, but we have to have the scheme to do so.
Yeah, and I think what you were saying earlier about Micah Parsons having such an impact on the total aspect of a team's offense is going to really force the Patriots staff to work around him individually, whether that's getting the ball out fast or just avoiding sacks, which is something that is going to be difficult with Parsons on the other side of the ball and the weak offensive line that the Patriots have seen. You were talking about the Patriots injury report. I just wanted to give an update to everybody. The Wednesday injury report, today's injury report for Thursday when we're recording, it's 11:30 about right now, hasn't come out yet. So we'll go off of yesterday. Only limited participation in practice. Nobody was out of practice other than those who are on IR. Christian Barmore was limited with a knee injury. Davon Godchuk with an ankle injury. Jonathan Jones was also limited with his ankle injury. Guard/tackle City So with a concussion. And Cole Strange was back on the injury report this week with a knee injury, which we saw him suffer towards the end of last week's game. Now, one thing I want to tap into is, I guess, more of the intelligence side of the Patriots offensive coaching staff. I think that last week against the Jets, I'm banking on the "it was all plans" idea from the Patriots, and it was kind of a planned strategy approach for them. Part of that seems to become credible with their recent moves in the free agency market. They signed Will Grier, former Cowboys backup quarterback, and we're a team right now that already has Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi bouncing back and forth between the practice squad and the 53-man roster, and Malik Cunningham also on the practice squad for New England. 3 quarterbacks in the system. And we've been in and out on guys over the past couple weeks.
Yep.
We bring in Grier, and the report going around right now, per Todd Archer, is, quote, "We know Will Grier knows where a lot of the bones are buried in the Cowboys offense, I should say. We know Zeke does as well. I'm sure Grier is definitely being interrogated right now." So JPA Football on Instagram said that the Cowboys plan to alter their signals prior to their Week 4 game against the Patriots because of Grier's sort of inside knowledge on the team, I guess. But my question for you is, do the Patriots' calculated moves continue with this Grier signing, or is it just by chance that we brought him in?
I think it was definitely intentional. It's also a factor that we just lost, or we just cut. Gosh, I'm blanking on his name. The quarterback that was with the Panthers for a while.
Yep, I know who you're talking about.
He was a good draft prospect anyways, but regardless, we cut him based on, I think it was some mental health issues that he was unable to come to the team. So we cut him, and now he is our Dak Prescott stand-in for the week, I believe, is how they're treating it. I had a point, and now I forget the point. That's what it was. Yes, no, I got it. It's going to be interesting because the Cowboys changed their offensive play caller this offseason. It was Kellen Moore, and now he is he's with the Chargers right now. He's calling their plays, which, see how that's going in terms of wins and losses. But also now Mike McCarthy is calling their plays, I believe. I'm fairly certain. And the jargon of the offense, I'm sure, is very different, especially because when Mike McCarthy came into Dallas, he made a big point that he was going to spend time learning Kellen Moore's offense, not the other way around. So they kept Kellen Moore's offense as long as Mike McCarthy has been there, as Kellen Moore was there before. Before Mike McCarthy he was there with Jason Garrett. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that we signed Will Grier and we talk about Zeke a lot, but neither of them have been under a Mike McCarthy offense. I don't believe that we have anybody who was with the Packers at the time either. So I think that we are kind of SOL in that sense. But I do think that in terms of understanding their personnel from a quarterback perspective and a running back perspective, it is important to have those guys, especially because the Patriots are such a heady team historically. It was always a big thing that if you get cut by the Patriots, you will immediately get signed by someone else, because if you're smart and good enough for Belichick, you were smart and good enough for anybody else.
Yeah.
So that's a big aspect of it as well. Teams often change their audibles based on who they're playing. They'll do their dummy calls, they'll do their activation calls and audibles. So it takes a little bit to figure that out throughout the course of the game, but I do think having somebody who's also of a similar skill set as Dak, obviously to a much lesser degree, Will Grier is, but they're similar type of players, type of quarterback. So it's a kind of a mix of both. But in short, I do think that it was calculated.
And I guess we're going to have to find out if it's going to pay off for New England or not. Last week, it seems that they snuck away a win from the Jets with their whole nonstop run. Will they be able to sneak a win away from the Cowboys this week? And I think that's a good transition into our 3 keys of the game. Chandler, I'll start with you. What are the 3 keys for New England to get the win this Sunday?
All right, my first key is we have to be way more physical than them. Because frankly, we are not as skilled as them. So in the battle of skill and physicality, it's like a spectrum. The really good teams can do both. We need to really lean on physicality. We're going to need to dominate the trenches, like I've said pretty much every week, and is generally just an important thing for football. But on top of that, it's not just dominate the trenches. It's make sure that Dak knows that we're here. Make sure that Tony Pollard knows that we're here. Make sure that CeeDee Lamb, who was a limited participant today, or actually did not participate on a non-injury reason, but knows that we're here. Make sure that Zach Martin and Tyler Biadasz, I think is how you pronounce the name of the center, who were both out last game and were do not practices today, know that we're there if they even play, which is a big deal because the Cowboys have an excellent offensive line. So we need to be more physical than them. We need to hit them, and we need to not let them hit us. Pretty simple. And similar to that, my second key, control Micah. Like I said, Micah Parsons is the most dangerous defensive weapon in football. He will line up everywhere. He will drop into coverage. He will rush. And there's no way that you can neutralize him. But you have to call the hot route or the hot coverage. Every side that he's on is the most dangerous side. Demarcus Lawrence, not Dexter Lawrence. Demarcus Lawrence is obviously an incredibly talented pass rusher as well. I'm so much more concerned with Micah. Have to live with that. And then the last one is going to kind of allude to what I think the score is going to be. We need to force 2 or more turnovers because we've seen that the offense is capable of sputtering. We've seen that this offense may not perform efficiently, especially against a really effective defense. Our defense needs to make Dak's life hell. So that's my 3 keys.
Well, I have some similar keys, and I guess that mine will also contribute to my score decision in the end. But starting with my first key, we got to cycle to the run game. We saw it come alive a little bit last week with Ezekiel Elliott having a pretty good game. But the Pats need to rely on turning to the run game throughout this game because the fact of the matter is, if you're not going to be able to cycle in a varied offensive play calling book, you're going to run into trouble against this very tough Cowboys defense. And I guess a vocal point of this key is that Ramondre has to step up to the plate this week. People were saying last week, oh, he played better. Like, even the Patriots themselves were like, our run game is starting to come alive. That starts with Zeke and Ramondre, who are playing better. Still not good enough. Last week was not a good enough performance, especially for Ramondre. Zeke, you can argue, sure, because technically he's RB2, but we really need Ramondre Stevenson to step up to the plate in this game against the Cowboys. Second key, you got to get quick passes off. We just talked about how lethal Micah Parsons is, along with the rest of the Cowboys front 7. They're way too good to leave Mac Jones as a sitting duck in the pocket for too long. They need to, and we also need to kind of expose the shorthandedness that the Cowboys have in the secondary. Of course, it's still a strong secondary, but missing that key piece in Trayvon Diggs, that turnover machine that you were talking about earlier, could mean a big win for New England in terms of the passing game. They can get balls out quickly, then I think that it would pay off for New England on the points front. Last but not least, ties into my whole narrative from last week. You got to unleash Mac. You said last week that the Pats are only going to unleash him when they absolutely have to. In this game, I don't see any excuse for us not to have to unleash Mac Jones. While I recognize that last week we were kind of featuring a strategy that catered to the terrible Jets offense, the Cowboys are not that team whatsoever. They have a good amount of offensive weapons on their side of the ball, including, like you said, strength up front with the offensive line and a pretty deep wide receiver core at its base. A lack of offensive production in this game is really going to bite us, so we need to get off on the right foot and unleash Mac from the get-go. Don't wait till the second half. Don't wait till you're behind. Get ahead early and start pushing the Cowboys back as much as you can with this supposed Patriots offense that we've seen at flashes throughout this season. But with that, Chandler, the moment that everybody's been waiting for, our score predictions. Who do you have in this game, and by how many points?
All right. So I've talked a lot about how I don't think the Patriots are going to lose by more than 12 points or win by more than 12 points at all this season. I did a big song and dance last week because I thought the Patriots were going to win. Thankfully, we did. I'm not going to do that this week. I think it's going to be a 31-20 loss, and I'll do you one better. I think we're going to score 6 points in the first half. No touchdowns.
Interesting. That's definitely, I guess, a fair take, but I'm going to go on the other side of the win column for the Patriots here. Got to commit, Chandler. I keep saying every week, next week is the most important game for New England, and this week has been a pinnacle in terms of that. They have a lot to prove, and I don't think it's going to be a slugfest on the offensive side of the ball, but I do have New England winning by a score of 24-17. Got to contain their offense. I think our defense is good enough to do that because on paper, I think our defense might be better than their offense, but it's going to be a lot to see in terms of the Patriots. They're going to need to capitalize this week. Hopefully they get the win, but that's where we'll wrap this week. Make sure to tune in on Monday for a full post-game reaction of the Cowboys versus Patriots matchup. And make sure to follow us here on YouTube, subscribe, like the video, go follow us on Spotify, stay up to date on when episodes go live. But for that, my name is Nick Antonakas alongside Chandler Betts. We'll see you back here next week. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.